Inferno Strider by Zap Candriod Wires, 1861, west of the Rockies. Chapter 1, Montana Negra. Distant whinnies and pitter-patter play their symphony in the dunes. A monsoon envelops the valley and blacks out the sun. Autumn leaves and distant mountains are the only present radiance after the kerosene ran its course 30 miles ago. The gray-whiskered driver looks to his right at the jingling lantern and sighs, adjusting his seating as he steers his languid stagecoach. Inside the ivory-plated doors of the carriage, a girthy man is awoken by a bump on a rocky trail. As his eyes open, he is greeted by more darkness. Coughing a little within the rarely dusted interior, he looks around for his cigar case. Somewhere over yonder, a lightning bolt strikes and illuminates the coach for a wink. It gleams opposite him, in between the right and center cushions. Reaching into the void, he grabs the case and feels for the opener switch on its copper surface. Click. Swinging ajar, he slides a finger within and comes upon the ninth and final loop to find the last smoke of the bunch. Gently squeezing with his index and thumb, he retracts it from the case, places the stogie in his mouth, and closes the copper shell. Click. His brow furrowed in confusion. His ears ring as he is jerked backward by the sudden stop, and he hurriedly opens the door to 3 jingling, burning lanterns, 3 stallions, and 3 gunmen in yellow bandanas aiming Colt Navy pistols at him. Slowly raising his hands, his mouth opens slightly, and he steps onto the mud of the high plains with his right foot. As he lowers his left leg and brushes past something warm, he peeks over his shoulder to see Jimmy with his eyes closed and his arms still gripping onto the reins, with 3 holes seeping blood in a minuscule waterfall of death. Looking back ahead of him at the highwayman, he sees the one in the middle holster his iron and raise his light to his face. It's a young blonde man. Now, I want you to... Before the blonde can finish his sentence, a nearby bolt of lightning interrupts him with a loud bang. At the exact instant the strike deafened the 4 men, the fat man listening in the mud spotted a silhouette in the brief flash, pointing a double-barreled shotgun at the back of the leader's head. He ducks and covers his head with his hands. The twin riders surrounding the newly headless horsemen feel the warmth of his blood splattering their legs, and their panicking steeds buck them from their saddles and into the ground. One turns around in a hurry and places a thumb on the hammer on his Colt, but before he can cock it, he feels the chilled metal of a gun barrel on his neck. Downhill, a lonesome coyote sees the bandit's severed head rolling down the slope and waits for it to come to a complete stop before coming closer for a bite. The third and final highwayman had his head lodged in the mud from his journey to the deck and was stuck, partially from the thickness of the mud and partially because the stranger was holding his neck still as he drowned in the rainwater. After the large man in the tattered white suit watched him suffocate the desperado for what felt like forever, the victim finally stopped kicking his legs and was let go of by his killer. The clouds parted and the sun shone upon the bloody hill. The stranger started walking away from the wet corpse, double barrel slung over his back. Staring intently, the stunned passenger stood up and yelled, "Who are you?" The stranger continued his pace silently towards the aftermath of the shootout and pilfers a Colt Navy from one of the bodies. He peels Jimmy's corpse from the seat and grabs the reins, before looking over at the girthy one and asking, "My name is Ryder Domingo. Need a ride?" Smiling and nodding, the debonair accepts his request and sits in the front seat next to the driver as he starts down the moist slope. "I live about 10 miles away, beyond the town of Silverfield. It's a green oasis." Domingo notices the cigar the stranger is gripping in his fist and lights a match. "Oh, thank you kindly, sir." Taking a puff, the girthy man catches a deep breath for the first time since the shot started firing and closes his eyes, exhaling a full lung's worth of smoke. Upon passing Silverfield's stop on the railroad, the driver says, "Is the smoke worth more praise than saving your life?" An awkward chuckle bellows through the cigar enjoyer's yellow teeth. "Sorry about my manners. I'm shaken up." He takes a cigar out of his mouth and taps the ash of the burning end, while saying, "Name's Cartwright Valentine. I own a big farm at my oasis, and I would be delighted to have you over for supper and pay you $1 of gold dollars for your heroism today." Ryder Domingo holds the reins with his right hand and tugs at his black scarf with his left, shaking it open to reveal it doubles as a poncho. He puts his head through it and replies, "I'll hurry up in that case." He shouts and snaps the reins, the carriage speeding forward and passing a weathered wooden sign covered in bullet holes. Passing through the cloud of dust in the coach's swift wake is a Pony Express deliveryman with an arrow in his left leg. Chapter 2, Vista Verde. Look for the cross. That's how you know it's the right way. The man with the reins nodded in acknowledgement of Valentine's directions and scanned the afternoon horizon. He spotted small patches of grass dotted across the sand and followed them over a small hill. Right there, Ryder the Rider. Somewhat tickled by the gentleman's linguistic flourish, Ryder Domingo couldn't see any cross, but did see a pair of palm trees tied together to form an X shape. Passing underneath the leaves and between well-trimmed tall hedges, the sounds of clicking horseshoe against stone started a cacophony that welcomed the pair into Valentine Oasis. Cartwright, where's Jimmy? A farmhand with a strangely misshapen rake posited the question. Cartwright simply shook his head. As the coach passed, he stared back at the farmer, who took off his straw hat and held it up to his overall-covered chest. Coming to a circular path with a modest fountain in the middle, Domingo rounds the rippling water and parks the stagecoach in front of a large set of double doors. The rescued Valentine steps off the ride and says, I'll be right back, asking the chef to fix us up something special before I give you a tour. Ryder nods and watches him dash through the entrance with a hearty gait. Looking up as he lifts his hat by the brim, a clock tower behind the main building catches his eye. He figures it must be 4 stories tall, and it reads 439 in Roman numerals, with the 4 written as 4 I's and not IV. Before he can notice anything else, he hears Cartwright again. Pardon the delay. Welcome to my home, Ryder. Stepping off the stagecoach as well, Domingo turns his poncho back into his scarf and follows the white-suited man indoors. The creaking of the hardwood floor is the first thing he notices. It'll be a few before supper is fixed, so let me show you my muse. Ryder follows Valentine through an unusual door covered in cushiony leather and is greeted by a bear standing on its hind legs. Don't worry, he's harmless. He looks at his host and wonders if the same is true of him. Every man needs a hobby. Mine is taxidermy. I order critters and turn them into statues of a sort. The guest relaxes after hearing he isn't the one who took down a grizzly. Looking at the ceiling, he sees a toucan, a bald vulture, a parrot, and a horned owl all in flying position and seemingly ready to kill each other. Gazing at the walls, he sees a monitor lizard made to look like it's scaling them. I've got little ones, too. Cartwright says this as he points to a table of glass domes. Tracking towards it on yet more creaky floorboards, Ryder bends over and sees a scene of 2 praying mantises attacking a figure of a medieval knight wielding a sword and shield. You seem taken by flights of fantasy. Valentine chuckles and takes a quick puff from a cigar. Thank you kindly. He walks over to Domingo's side and glances over his precious domes. You know, I could... Before he could finish the thought, a triangle rings and echoes throughout the house. Oh dear, it's supper time already. Time flies when you indulge your hobby. Come, come. He says as he beckons Ryder with his empty hand to follow him back into the lobby. This way, this way. The man in the black scarf turns to the sound of Cartwright's voice. The dining room is right before you. Take a seat. Pulling back a mahogany chair, Domingo sits down and removes his scarf, draping it over the back of the seat. He looks at the silver platter before him resting on the doily and lifts its shroud, revealing a steamed crab with romaine and lemon surrounding it. He inhales the aroma of the crustacean and starts to gag. Hurriedly replacing the shroud, he says, I'm sorry, but I hate seafood. I'm allergic to it. Sitting opposite Ryder, Cartwright sinks to his chair slightly and says, I had no idea. That's my follow-up. His eyes darted around the room before looking to the left of his guest. Matsumoto, why don't you play a song while the good man waits for another dish instead? Hi. Ryder was confused and looked over his left shoulder after hearing the odd noise. An oriental man with a sheathed sword in his lap started blowing into a flute. Oh, I ought to have introduced you. This here is Matsumoto. He's usually my bodyguard, but my interpreter has been away in Silverfield getting medical care. I can't understand a lick of what he's saying, but he can understand the king's English. Domingo is intrigued by this foreigner. Where did he come from? Valentine cracks a crab leg and responds. Apparently, he escaped to California on a Dutch ship after taking part in a failed rebellion against Emperor Kome, said the flute player, interrupting his own tune and quickly resuming it. He has the sharpest sword I've ever seen. It could cut a buffalo's head off in one chop. Ain't that right, Matsumoto? Hidoi. He starts a more somber melody after this remark. Ryder tilts his head in intrigue. Cartwright places his elbow on the table and points his left finger at his guest, swallows a bite of lettuce, and blinks a couple times before asking, Speaking of mighty beasts, before the dinner bell interrupted me for a spell back there, I was about to ask you if you could do a special job for me. Domingo leans back in his chair as the mustachioed chef places a new platter in front of him and removes the shroud, revealing a sizzling plate of pork ribs. Go on, the guest utters as he grabs a steaming bone from the dish. Have you ever heard of the Chupacabra? Ryder bites into and rips a fatty piece of meat off the rib in his hands. His eyes look around in thought as he chews, and he finally says, I don't believe so. Why? Valentine, finishing his plate, pushes the empty platter forward and replies, It's a hairless hound from the depths of hell. It has fangs like a tiger, long talons like an eagle, and spines like a lizard. Ryder Domingo licks the bones clean, puts it back on the plate, lays his left arm along the length of the table, puts his right hand on his hip, and lowers his head while maintaining eye contact with his host for a moment before saying, That's horse feathers. I heard it myself in town at a saloon from a claim holder of a well-known silver vein in Death Valley, far away from here. He wanted a ranch all by himself as well as mine the ore. He would have been rich, but his pigs and goats just kept keeling over. Domingo crosses his arms. He stayed up late one night of the full moon and kept watch to see who was doing it. He thought it was Paiute maybe, but no. He watched a doggy creep up behind his milk goat, stab it with one of its little arms, and bite its neck, slurping down its blood until it fell over dead. It didn't even scream, it was so terrified. Ryder grins slightly as he shifts his head right, continuing to keep at attention. Valentine smiles in turn and finishes his piece. That thing is really there in that valley, and I want you to bring it to me dead. Chapter 3. Valle de la Muerte. A hawk's shadow passes over the black Mustang. Glancing at the perforated sign that reads, Death Valley, Ryder Domingo journeys into the nothing that lay before him. Secured on the horse's rear left side is a bedroll, and on its right, a mostly empty blue chest with 19 full canteens of water tied to it. Worn on the hunter's person is his trusty breech-loader side-by-side double-barrel 12-gauge shotgun, with Peacemaker inscribed on one barrel and Peacebreaker inscribed on the other. Wrapped tightly is a pistol belt provided graciously by Cartwright's payment from a couple days before. Within is a cutting-edge 1861 model Colt Navy revolver chambered in .36 caliber. The holster holds the gun pointed downward and behind the user, with the handle hanging upwards on the left waist, for a draw that can be done comfortably with the shooter's back against the wall, just in case. In an olive-green satchel drooping over Ryder's right waist is a myriad of small travel necessities. A couple books, 2 boxes of matches, a compass, a knife, a knit sack of mesquite-flavored beef jerky, and a map of California and the Nevada Territory. He rides slowly and steadily, so the somewhat old girl he took for the trip doesn't overheat or give out on him. Black Betty, he thinks it was named. The pursuit of this Chupacabra moves along peacefully and quietly for most of the first day. Before setting out, Ryder ate a hearty meal of 3 fried over-easy eggs and 2 hot links, which ought to be more than enough to tide him over until the second day. That's when the other hunts would have to begin. For jackrabbits, for snakes, yucca brevifolia fruits growing on Joshua trees, and whatever else he could get his hands on and eat, because the jerky wasn't going to last long enough on its own to keep a man alive for a potentially 10-day-long expedition. When nighttime comes, he sets up a camp. He opens up a canteen shortly after starting the fire and carefully pours the water in Black Betty's mouth. She flaps her lips around in gratitude, and Ryder laughs at the absurd-looking gesture. Domingo removes the bedroll from his silly steed, currently securely stabled on a post he staked into the ground, and unfolds it, preparing to rest when he hears a growl. It comes from behind, and then forward, and then to his sides. As it grows in volume, he sees a pair of eyes glowing in the reflection of the campfire, and then others appear in a circle around the encampment. 8 coyotes surround the hopeful hunter and are approaching out of the darkness. Staying nearly still as his legs are tucked into the bedroll, Ryder draws his Colt Navy and aims it at the nearest pair of eyes. He closes one of his own to aim true, and points it between the amber mirrors of ember. He hears a high-pitched whimper and the eyes close in a flash. The other 7 hounds bark and scurry away, quickened footsteps echoing in the distance. Black Betty loses composure from the loud noise and jitters around, kicking up dust with her horseshoes, before she's calmed down in short order by her current master. As Ryder pets her, he gazes at the dead canine and gets the feeling he'll sleep well. Chapter 4. Temporada Abierta. His belly full of coyote brisket after breakfast, the hunt continues. After some uneventful hours counting vultures in the sky and munching on jerky, The abandoned ranch comes into distant view. The sun was in the dead center of the sky. It was definitely noon. Cartwright wasn't lying when he said the journey was a day and a half by horse, but there was no knowing when or, indeed, if the Chupacabra would show up. A few hundred paces later at the entrance, the stench bore down on Ryder's senses. It was a rancid, foul miasma that effectively conveyed the magnitude of animal waste and decaying carcasses that lay in the sty and field behind the ranch house. Domingo took off his poncho and fashioned it into an oversized bandana he wore over his face, but it didn't help the odor much. Unpacking the gear from Black Betty, Ryder guides the mount into the ranch house to give her some much-needed shade and finds a corner to rest it in. Reaching through his green satchel, he grabs a tan book Valentine gifted to him and opens it up. So you want to be a taxidermist by Richard Scholes, copyright 1857. Have you just slain a leopard in the Dark Continent and wish to bring it back to civilization to prove the feat, but worry it may expire with rot by the time you're back home safe in Nuremberg? Fear not! The groundbreaking science of taxidermy procedures will preserve your game for an eternity with proper care. Continue reading these 100 pages and... Domingo yawns, puts his fist up to his gaping mouth, and then attempts to continue reading through his heavy eyelids. You will become a fine taxidermist, capable of turning fine animals such as the chestnut-sided Vabla into fantastic furnishings worthy of any abode. The hunter falls asleep, dropping the book on his lap. After years of battling ne'er-do-wells and the elements, he is finally defeated by a dense German reference book. Several hours pass before Black Betty wakes him with a screaming neigh. Ryder Domingo jumps to his feet and hears a ruckus in the other room. He charges towards the commotion, Colt Navy in hand, and sees the Mustang bucking and kicking holes in the wooden walls, with a hairless, spiny dog attached to its rear end, via its clawed hand. Gripped with the revelation that this monster is real, the gunman has a cold sweat. Ryder whistles, and the Chupacabra turns its attention to him, blank gray eyes glaring with hatred. I'm the last honest man you'll ever cross. The thing shrieks at him, and its spines gesticulate as it releases the sharp hand from its prey, slowly walking towards the hunter on its hind legs and drooling. Pulling on the trigger with his right hand and hovering his left over the hammer, he watches the Chupacabra extend its arms, hissing, before fanning 6 quick bullets into the creature's chest. The fiendish figure stops in its tracks and bleeds profusely, spraying a veritable geyser of red all over the hunter, forcing him to close his eyes. He simultaneously holsters his weapon and wipes the coarse blood from his face, and sees the target laying on the floor, still bleeding with force. Exhaling sharply, Ryder utters, messy. Right at that instant, the monster leaps forth and tackles Domingo to the deck, starts tearing away pieces of his poncho, and begins trying to bite a chunk off his face. It punches holes in the floor on each side of him and lunges its head forward for a neck chomp. The hunter holds him back, but is dwarfed in strength by the might of his opponent, and his grip is slowly weakening. Its breath smells like death itself, and it makes his stomach churn. After constantly struggling, the creature suddenly goes limp and finally stops bleeding. Shoving aside its body, the man tries to stand up, but slips on the preponderance of blood and falls right onto his rear. Gritting his teeth, Ryder rises again and back on his feet. Placing both of his hands on his lower back, he pushes and stretches at the same time, his sore spine letting out a hefty crack. He steps over to Black Betty and pours a canteen of water over her wounds, and uses some of the now dyed red poncho's torn scraps to plug up the scratches on her rear. I didn't mean to use you as bait, but you saved me a lot of time and energy. Thanks. He pulls a carrot out of his green satchel and feeds it to her. A short while later, after loading the moist, dangerous game into the blue chest, he grabs a bottle of arsenic and tears out its cork with a knife, making a satisfying pop sound as he does so. He opens its toothy mouth and pours the powderized chemical agent down its throat, as instructed to by Cartwright before leaving in order to preserve its flesh. With plenty of provisions left due to the unexpectedly short hunt, the trip back tomorrow and a half day after would be simple. Chapter 5. Durango di Sangre. A dark blue evening sky casts no shadows upon a cross of palm trees. A great silence permeates the Valentine estate's exterior until it is interrupted by the gentle clip-clopping of a triumphant Black Betty trotting around the fountain. Untying emptied canteens, a bedroll with a fresh pair of rattlesnake bite marks on it, and a chest of precious carrying cargo from the horse is Ryder Domingo, with a new beard after his lonesome 4-day voyage. As he guides Betty's head to the clean water from the fountain, the man in the red poncho gazes at the clock tower. It reads 6:22. Tying a rope to the end of the blue chest, he drags the prize to the front porch of the big house and knocks on the door with gusto. While taking a swig from a canteen, he looks at the steed that brought him all that way, and wishes he could reward her in the same way he's about to be for her efforts. The door opens, and he hears a question from the leathery farmhand standing hunched before him. "Where did you get that new poncho?" He looks down at the tattered crimson wool and says, "The Chupacabra gave it to me." The hand lets out a belly laugh and ushers him in, shortly before forming a cone over his mouth with curled hands and yelling, "This sumbitch actually did it!" A thunder of wooden creaks approaches the lobby as Valentine, Matsumoto, the mustachioed chef, and a stranger rush into view. Ryder glances at the well-dressed sir in an emerald suit and asks, "Who are you?" The gentleman places his right hand on his left shoulder while bowing his head and responds, "I am pleased to make your acquaintance. The name's Glenn Charleston. I'm a language interpreter fluent in French, German, Italian, Chinese, Japanese, and Mexican." Ryder nods and turns his attention to the Oasis owner, watching the very energetic fellow shuffle his feet, grab the doorknob to the enclosed taxidermy chamber, and gesture for everyone to follow him in. Waiting for the others to make their way first, Domingo pulls his bounty to the center of the room and kicks the chest open. All six lean over to Chupacabra and marvel at it for a few before chiming in. "It's just like Franco described. Hoo-wee, that stinks!" It was a real nasty critter. It actually smelled worse when it was alive, if you can believe it. My word. Kappa no kata go inshu teki desu. I wonder what it tastes like. Cartwright, the farmhand, Ryder, Glenn, and Matsumoto all slowly turn their heads and stare at the mustachioed chef after that remark. "It was a joke! Honest!" He utters while performing double mano borsa. Valentine picks up the beast and inspects it, flicking its eyeballs and stroking its claws. "It's in great shape. You must have studied the book I gave you." Ryder looks away and scratches his head, saying, "It was very informative." After another minute of looking the strange dog over, Cartwright's stomach rumbles loudly. "Right, I'd better get back to my supper. I was on my first leg." Carefully placing the animal back in the blue chest and shutting it, Valentine turned towards the lobby and started his walk towards the dining room. His ears searing in anguish, the red poncho-wearing hunter can now only hear a high-pitched tone as he witnesses the Baron's legs get torn off by a hail of bullets. Ryder falls backward into the chamber and hits his head on the floor, ignoring the pain while scrambling back to his feet. Seeing his contractor crippled and laying on his left side on the carpet, Domingo steps forward and reaches for the bloodied Baron, but another volley of bullet impacts makes him hesitate. Cartwright is yelling something at him, his lips trembling. He reaches his right arm upwards at the bearded man before his middle and ring fingers are shot off and sent flying away. Valentine retches in pain and bows his head, checking his mutilated hand when a plume of scarlet aerosolizes out of his right temple. Chapter 6, Zancudo Infernal. Ryder Domingo experiences a sensation of heat that overwhelms his senses. There is no wool itch, no wind, and no more hurt. He turns around to look at the others within the chamber and sees the chef cowering, Glenn picking at his ears, and Matsumoto drawing his sword. As his hearing returns, he hears shouting from the courtyard. "Cartwright, salve entrega este paraiso fertil o desperarmos a la ametralladora otra vez. Todos esos disparos fueron un arma." Glenn clears his throat and prepares to translate, but Ryder interrupts with, "Allow me." Ryder stands closer to the doorway and screams this at the top of his lungs. "Baile al Inferno, puta!" He grabs hold of his double barrel with both hands, rolls into the hallway, and runs towards the battered front door, tackling it with his right shoulder and breaking it into splinters. In this moment of exit, the vengeful hunter notices the hedges on the estate are all on fire. The two men clad in yellow bandanas and holding the smoking Gatling gun pointed at the house quiver in fear and shout. They open fire at him at the same instant Ryder jumps, narrowly missing their burst. He lands on the left wheel of the Gatling gun and cocks both hammers of the shotgun simultaneously with his right thumb, pointing it at the desperado aiming the gun. The bandit gasps and reaches for his revolver, but it's a worthless act. Domingo pulls both triggers, firing both the Peacemaker and Peacebreaker barrels. The assailant is torn in half at the waist. His legs fall apart from one another, and his torso hits the ground chest down. He screams in agony as his entrails spray a fountain of blood every which way in a wild frenzy. He covers his eyes with his palms as he continues to wail. His violent cry echoes for miles and wakes up several citizens sleeping in the nearby town of Silverfield in a cold sweat. A moment after the boom, Domingo drops his shotgun and rips the massive 6-barreled weapon off of its wheeled base. Clang! He aims it at the yellow killer and turns the crank in an underhanded motion, emptying all 15 remaining 58 caliber rounds in the magazine into his adversary's chest and dropping him to the ground in short order. Ryder Domingo steps off the Gatling's base and grabs spare magazines for the device, stuffing 2 of them down the back of his pants. As the people in the taxidermy chamber overheard the echoing scream of Cartwright's murderer, Matsumoto whispers for the others to stay put as he dashes out of the room and scans the hallway. The samurai spots an intruder in the kitchen donning yellow bandana and carrying a .44 Henry rifle. Shinryu Sha, K? The rifleman says, while turning around to catch sight of him swinging the blade diagonally towards his covered face. His nose, right eye, and part of his brain all sever from his head and fall on the tiled floor. Bastardo! Matsumoto turns right to see the barrel of a Henry rifle pointed at his chest. Shink! A pair of glass jugs shatter behind a blade-wielding warrior. The desperado's mouth goes agape when he realizes his bullet was just cut in half in midair. He turns tail and tries to run, but the lightweight defender was too fast for him. He is impaled by a swift katana and comes to a halt. From between the flaming cross of palm trees on the edge of Valentine Estate, 5 more yellow devils charge in a final assault. Ryder Domingo grits his teeth and cranks the Gatling gun once more. The first caught one in the neck and right kneecap and fell over as he reached for his throat. The second one was hit twice in the chest and dropped to his knees, dead before he hit the floor. The third one loses his left arm and attempts to fire his .44 rifle one-handed, but is way off and ends up breaking his remaining arm. The fourth one's jaw falls off from being struck, and he runs away into the desert, leaving behind his dual pistols. The fifth one loses his right leg, but manages to stay upright, balancing on one leg and attempting to take aim. He misses 2 shots and loses hope, placing his Colt Navy in his mouth and pulling the trigger to end his misery, failing at last. The Avenger drops a scalding hot, gargantuan automatic 6-gun, and hears the howling of distant coyotes as he stares into the Inferno before him. The end. Hope you enjoyed this. I've got plenty of more stories. You can see them on all kinds of websites. Fanfiction, Fiction Press, Wattpad, Archive of Roan. Check me out sometime. I might make more audiobooks. I might write more stories. Thank you, and I hope you share this with your friends.